Long before the Norman conquest, England was a land of fragmented kingdoms, each ruled by its own Saxon king. The rise of these rulers was often violent, their authority forged in battles and alliances, marriages and betrayals. Yet amidst this turbulent era, one symbol stood above all: a crown. Not merely a piece of gold and jewels, it represented divine right, power, and the fragile unity of the realm. The crown was a beacon, a reminder that kings were chosen not only by bloodlines, but by destiny and the consent of warriors, nobles, and priests who wielded influence alongside the monarch. In those early centuries, the Anglo-Saxon kingship was far more than ceremonial. The crown was an emblem of justice, leadership, and the sacred bond between ruler and people. To wear it was to accept the burden of protection, judgment, and warfare. To lose it, or to see it fall into enemy hands, was to invite chaos, rebellion, or even annihilation. It was both a promise and a threat, a reminder that power could be fleeting, no matter how solid the walls of a fortress or how loyal the army. The crown of the Saxon kings was also a work of art. Crafted from the finest gold, adorned with gemstones brought from distant lands, and engraved with intricate designs, it reflected both wealth and sophistication. Yet its beauty was not mere decoration. It served as a constant, tangible reminder that the king's authority was sanctioned by divine and earthly powers alike. Every ceremony, every coronation, every oath of loyalty revolved around it. Those who laid eyes upon it felt the weight of history, the gravity of obedience, and the promise of protection under a ruler who was more than a man. He was a symbol. But history is seldom kind to symbols. As kingdoms rose and fell, as invaders from across the North Sea threatened the fragile order, crowns were stolen, hidden, or lost. The most famous of these, the lost crown of the Saxon kings, vanished under circumstances that remain shrouded in mystery. Some say it was taken by Vikings, spirited away during a midnight raid. Others insist it was hidden by loyal priests or nobles who feared it would fall into the wrong hands. Some legends even claim it was destroyed, melted down for its gold, its jewels scattered across Europe. Yet despite centuries of searching, the crown remains missing, a phantom relic whispered about in chronicles and folktales alike. The mystery of the lost crown is not just a tale of treasure. It is a story of ambition, loyalty, fear, and ingenuity. To understand it, one must step into the turbulent world of the Saxon kingdoms, a land of shifting allegiances, sudden violence, and enduring courage. Each king who wore it was tested by war, betrayal, and diplomacy. Each noble who swore loyalty risked death or disgrace. And each commoner, caught in the crossfire of ambition, faced the consequences of battles that would be remembered for generations. In this narrative, we follow not only the crown itself but the lives it touched. We explore the rise and fall of kings who wore it, the battles fought to protect it, the intrigues that surrounded it, and the human stories that have survived through the fog of centuries. The crown's disappearance invites speculation, but also reflection on the era it symbolizes, a time when leadership was visible, tangible, and inextricably tied to the survival of communities and kingdoms. Consider Wessex, one of the most powerful Saxon kingdoms. Its kings wore their crowns with pride, but they also carried the burden of constant vigilance. Viking raids were relentless and alliances could shift overnight. In one chronicle, a king's crown was nearly stolen while he slept, only saved by the courage of his guards and the loyalty of a trusted chamberlain. Such incidents reveal how fragile even the mightiest authority could be, and how closely the fate of a kingdom was tied to the safety of a single object of gold and jewels. The symbolism of the crown extended beyond politics. It was a spiritual artifact as much as a political one. Priests blessed it, consecrating it as a vessel of divine favor. Oaths sworn upon it were considered binding by both law and religion. To wear it was to carry the weight of heaven and earth, a responsibility that could inspire loyalty or provoke envy. It was a symbol of unity in a fragmented land, a beacon of hope and order amidst the chaos of frequent battles, raids, and feuds. Yet the very prominence of the crown made it a target. History records countless examples of kings overthrown, crowns seized, and treasures looted during moments of weakness. The loss of a crown could signal the collapse of authority, inviting rival kings, rebellious nobles, or invading forces to stake their claim. In this sense, the lost crown of the Saxon kings is emblematic not only of material wealth, but of the fragility of power and the ever-present shadow of betrayal. Legends surrounding the lost crown evolved over centuries. Bards, chroniclers, and later historians embellished its story, weaving in elements of mysticism and heroism. Some tales speak of a crown that gleamed with magical light, granting wisdom to the rightful king. Others describe curses upon anyone who tried to claim it unlawfully. Whether true or myth, these stories reflect the importance of the crown in the imagination of generations, preserving its memory long after it vanished from sight. The lost crown is also a reminder of the people whose lives were intertwined with its fate. Soldiers who defended it, nobles who coveted it, and civilians who suffered in wars fought over its possession. Each played a role in the story of its disappearance. Their courage, ingenuity, and sometimes their tragedy are echoed in the chronicles that survive. By tracing the crown's history, we uncover not only the fate of an object but the human drama that shaped medieval England. As we embark on this exploration, we enter a world where gold and jewels symbolized authority, where kings' fates were tied to the objects they wore, and where legends could emerge from both fact and imagination. The Lost Crown of the Saxon Kings invites us to reflect on power, ambition, and the enduring mysteries of history. Its story is not only about a vanished treasure, but about a vanished era, a civilization of warriors, leaders, and ordinary people whose lives were shaped by the presence, or absence, of a single symbol of authority. Through the centuries, countless searches have failed to uncover the crown. Archaeologists have scoured ancient abbeys, hidden vaults, and burial sites. Historians have pieced together chronicles, letters, and oral traditions. Treasure hunters have scoured forests, rivers, and ruins. And yet, the crown remains elusive, a symbol of England's shadowed past, whispering across time. Its absence has inspired both imagination and scholarship, and it continues to fascinate those who seek to understand not only the object itself but the turbulent world from which it came. In the end, the lost crown of the Saxon kings endures as a testament. It is a testament to the ambition of rulers, the courage of defenders, the ingenuity of those who sought to protect it, and the enduring power of legend. As we follow its trail through history, we glimpse the lives of those who lived, fought, and sometimes died in its shadow. We see a world of shifting kingdoms, valorous deeds, and unrelenting peril. And we are reminded that some mysteries, though they remain unsolved, continue to speak to us across the centuries, echoing the glimmer of gold, the weight of jewels, and the enduring power of human imagination. In the early centuries of Anglo-Saxon England, the land was a patchwork of kingdoms: Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia, each vying for power, territory, and influence. Out of this fractured landscape, kings rose, fell, and fought tirelessly to expand their domains. Amid this turbulence, crowns were forged, not only as symbols of wealth, but as emblems of legitimacy, authority, and the divine right to rule. Each crown was unique, a masterpiece of goldsmithing adorned with gemstones imported from distant lands, and intricately engraved with symbols that conveyed power, protection, and sacred obligation. The crown was more than an ornament, it was a statement. To place it upon one's head was to accept responsibility for the lives of thousands, soldiers, nobles, and common folk alike. It symbolized the unity of a kingdom that was otherwise a loose alliance of territories, bound together not by law alone but by loyalty, faith, and fear. The weight of the crown was both literal and figurative. The gold was heavy, yes, but the burden of rulership was far heavier, pressing upon kings with every decision, battle, and council meeting. In these formative years, the relationship between king and crown was intertwined with both ceremony and warfare. Coronations were elaborate affairs, combining the solemnity of religious blessing with the pomp of fealty from warriors and nobles. Priests consecrated the crown, invoking divine favor, and reminding all present that kingship was sanctioned by powers beyond human comprehension. Soldiers and retainers swore loyalty, while nobles calculated alliances, weighing ambition against allegiance. Every ritual, every oath, every glance upon the crown reinforced the fragile authority of a ruler in a land defined by shifting borders and constant threat. Yet the crowns themselves were not merely ceremonial, they were central to the political and military life of a kingdom. Kings displayed their crowns during battles, parades, and diplomatic meetings. To wear a crown in the presence of enemies was to assert dominance, to declare a claim over land, and to inspire fear and respect. In times of war, crowns became targets. To seize the crown was to challenge authority, to claim legitimacy, and often to spark further conflict. The stakes were immense, and the consequences of losing the crown could be fatal. Consider the Kingdom of Wessex, one of the earliest and most resilient Saxon kingdoms. Its kings understood that authority was fragile. Battles were not just contests of skill or bravery, they were tests of legitimacy. A king without a crown was a king without power, a ruler whose claim could be contested by ambitious nobles or rival monarchs. In response, crowns were sometimes hidden, guarded in secret chambers, or transported under heavy escort during times of unrest. The crown was as much a weapon as a symbol, wielded to assert control and maintain the loyalty of those who served the king. The craftsmanship of the crowns was remarkable. Goldsmiths of the era combined artistry with political messaging. Gemstones were arranged in patterns that signified divine protection, strength, and continuity. Engravings often included runes or religious symbols, linking the king to both the mortal and spiritual realms. The crowns conveyed a subtle but powerful message. The wearer was chosen, blessed, and above all, accountable to forces greater than any single man. To challenge the crown was to challenge the king, and to challenge the king was to risk death, dishonor, or exile. But power is never secure. The early Saxon kingdoms were defined by instability. Wars erupted over succession disputes, border skirmishes, and claims of legitimacy. Crowns changed hands not always through inheritance, but through force, cunning, and at times, betrayal. Some kings were deposed while asleep, their crowns stolen before the kingdom could react. Others were challenged openly on the battlefield, where the victor claimed not only the land but the symbolic authority embodied in the crown. History records these moments with a mixture of awe and horror, illustrating how intertwined objects of gold were with the fate of entire peoples. In addition to political significance, crowns held spiritual weight. Priests, monks, and advisors reinforced the notion that kingship was divinely sanctioned. Religious ceremonies consecrated the crown, binding it to the sacred traditions of the church. Oaths sworn upon the crown carried extraordinary moral force. To break such an oath was not merely treason, it was an affront to the divine, punishable by excommunication, shame, or death. The crown thus became a bridge between earthly and spiritual authority, a constant reminder that kings were accountable not only to men but to God. The life of a crown was fraught with danger. Rivals coveted it, invaders sought to capture it, and internal rebellions threatened its security. Stories survive of loyal retainers who hid crowns in secret chambers, buried them in abbey grounds, or transported them across rivers and forests to prevent capture. In some cases, crowns were lost or stolen, vanishing into legend. These losses were catastrophic, for without the crown, a king's legitimacy could crumble, sparking civil war or inviting foreign conquest. The lost crown of the Saxon kings is one such story, a relic whose disappearance still fascinates historians and treasure seekers alike. Yet the crown also inspired loyalty and courage. Soldiers fought with renewed vigor to defend the symbol of authority. Citizens saw in it a promise of stability, justice, and protection. It embodied ideals that transcended mere politics: honor, sacrifice, and the unity of a kingdom under a recognized ruler. In the darkest hours of war, when walls burned and enemies pressed close, the crown became a beacon, a rallying point that reminded all within the kingdom that their collective survival was tied to the king and the symbol he wore. The lost crown is thus more than a missing treasure. It represents the birth of a kingdom, the struggle for power, and the values that shaped early medieval England. Its story illuminates the lives of kings, nobles, and commoners alike. It is a narrative of ambition and fear, of craftsmanship and ritual, of battles fought not just with swords, but with loyalty, cunning, and devotion. Each tale, each fragment of history, adds to our understanding of an era where symbols mattered as much as armies, and where a single object could determine the fate of thousands. In exploring the birth of the Saxon kingdoms and their crowns, we see a world alive with intrigue, danger, and human drama. Crowns were forged, battles were fought, and dynasties rose and fell. Yet the symbolic power of the crown endured, transcending individual kings and touching every life within the kingdom. It became the nexus of authority, the embodiment of divine favor, and the object of endless desire. As we continue our journey, the lost crown becomes not only a mystery to solve but a lens through which we can view the formation of kingdoms, the exercise of power, and the human stories that history often overlooks. In its absence, we are reminded that history is shaped not only by what remains, but by what has vanished, and that sometimes, the greatest treasures are those that exist forever in legend, echoing across centuries and inspiring the imagination of generations to come. Asterisk. The world of the Saxon kingdoms was one of constant tension and fragile alliances. Kings ruled lands fragmented by geography and ambition, their authority often dependent on the loyalty of nobles, warriors, and clerics. But loyalty was never guaranteed. Ambition, envy, and fear shaped relationships as much as bloodlines or oaths. Crowns, as symbols of ultimate authority, were at the center of these struggles. To wear a crown was to be a target, to aspire to it was to risk everything, and to protect it was to navigate a labyrinth of strategy, diplomacy, and occasionally deception. Wars erupted for many reasons: disputed succession, territorial expansion, revenge, or the desire to assert dominance over rival kingdoms. Every battle carried consequences beyond the immediate clash of swords. A king who fell in battle might be buried with honor, but his crown could vanish into the hands of victors, signaling the end of his dynasty. The seizure or loss of a crown was never a mere act of theft. It represented the transfer of legitimacy, the triumph of one ruler over another, and the reshaping of political landscapes. Betrayals were common and often deadly. Nobles switched allegiances overnight, seduced by promises of wealth, land, or power. Trusted advisors might conspire with enemies to undermine a king, or seize the crown during moments of weakness. In some cases, kings were betrayed by their closest allies in the dead of night, overthrown before they could marshal their forces. These acts of treachery illustrate the precariousness of authority in a world where trust was as valuable, and as fragile, as the gold of the crown itself. The crown itself became a pawn in these conflicts. Rival factions would vie for possession, sometimes hiding it to prevent an opponent from claiming legitimacy. Chronicles recount kings fleeing with their crowns into forests, abbeys, or secret chambers, guarded by loyal retainers who risked their lives. In other instances, crowns were seized during coups or during sudden raids, forever altering the political landscape. The possession of the crown could instantly shift the allegiance of entire armies, change the course of battles, and redefine the borders of kingdoms. Wars and betrayals were not limited to kings and nobles. Soldiers, mercenaries, and even civilians were drawn into the chaos, often suffering the consequences of decisions made in royal halls far from the battlefield. Towns were looted, villages burned, and fortresses besieged. Families were displaced, and those who survived carried the scars of conflict for generations. The crown, while a symbol of authority, became a focal point for violence and suffering, its allure inseparable from the human cost it represented. One of the most striking features of these conflicts was their unpredictability. Alliances could shift in an instant, battles could be won or lost by a single decision, and a crown could change hands without a fight through clever negotiation or treachery. Historians have documented instances where a king's reign ended not on the battlefield, but through betrayal at court, a poisoned chalice, a secret attack in the dead of night, or the sudden defection of loyal warriors. These moments highlight the precarious nature of power and the constant threat that loomed over every ruler. Vikings added another layer of complexity and danger. Their raids were sudden, brutal, and often indiscriminate. Kings and nobles had to respond quickly to protect their people and retain their crowns. The threat of invasion could unite warring factions temporarily, but often these alliances were fragile, dissolved once the immediate danger passed. During these years, the Saxon crown was both a rallying point and a target, a symbol that could inspire soldiers to defend their homeland or provoke ambitious rivals to act decisively. The political landscape of the Saxon kingdoms was also shaped by marriage, diplomacy, and alliances. Kings sought to secure loyalty through strategic marriages, the exchange of gifts, and oaths sworn upon sacred relics. Yet even these arrangements could be fraught with betrayal. Marriages intended to unify kingdoms could fail, treaties could be broken, and envoys might secretly conspire with enemies. In this world, the crown represented stability, but stability was always temporary, contingent upon human loyalty, cunning, and sometimes sheer luck. Throughout these centuries, the lost crown itself played a silent role in countless stories of intrigue. Chronicles mention moments when kings took extraordinary measures to safeguard their crowns, hiding them in abbeys, burying them in secret locations, or entrusting them to loyal servants who knew that failure could mean death. Legends suggest that the crown changed hands multiple times, sometimes unseen by the public, shifting allegiances and complicating the historical record. These tales reflect the perilous life of a crown in a world defined by ambition and violence. Betrayals were often personal as much as political. A king might be betrayed by a trusted friend, a sibling, or a vassal whose ambitions outweighed loyalty. The consequences could be immediate and lethal: assassination, imprisonment, or forced abdication. Such betrayals were recorded in chronicles not only to inform future rulers but also to warn them of the dangers of complacency. Every action surrounding the crown was imbued with risk, and every decision had repercussions that rippled through the kingdom. Despite the chaos, moments of heroism and loyalty emerged. Soldiers defended kings to the last breath, loyal nobles risked their lives to protect the crown, and civilians sometimes acted courageously to safeguard it from invaders. These acts of bravery, often overshadowed by tales of treachery, highlight the human dimension of these conflicts. The crown was not only a symbol of authority, it was a beacon that could inspire courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. The interplay of war and betrayal ultimately defined the legacy of the lost crown. Its disappearance may have been the result of conflict, treachery, or careful concealment, but its story reflects the complexity of power in the Saxon kingdoms. Kings rose and fell, alliances shifted, and battles were won and lost, yet the crown remained central, a tangible representation of authority, ambition, and the human struggle for dominance. The consequences of these wars were profound. Kingdoms were reshaped, dynasties replaced, and the political map of England altered repeatedly. The loss or seizure of a crown could spark years of unrest, influence foreign relations, and determine the fates of countless individuals. Every conflict left its mark, not only on stone and territory but on memory, chronicled in manuscripts, sagas, and oral traditions. These stories ensured that the crown's legacy, even in its absence, remained alive in the cultural consciousness of England. Ultimately, the wars and betrayals surrounding the Saxon crowns illustrate a timeless truth. Power is never secure, and symbols of authority are always contested. The lost crown represents not only a physical object but the fragility of human ambition, the consequences of deception, and the enduring struggle for legitimacy. Through centuries of conflict, it remained a prize and a symbol, inspiring both fear and reverence, shaping the destinies of kings, nobles, and ordinary people alike. As we reflect on this chapter, we see that the crown's disappearance is inseparable from the wars and betrayals of its era. Its story is intertwined with acts of courage, deceit, loyalty, and ambition. The lost crown reminds us that history is not merely a record of events. It is a tapestry of human choices, each one capable of altering the course of kingdoms, the fate of rulers, and the lives of those who lived under their reign. Through the lens of wars and betrayals, the lost crown becomes more than a missing artifact. It becomes a symbol of the human experience itself, illustrating the delicate balance between loyalty and ambition, the peril of power, and the enduring mystery that continues to captivate historians and enthusiasts alike. Even in its absence, the crown's story teaches us about the courage, ingenuity, and treachery that defined an era, echoing across the centuries as a testament to the turbulent world of the Saxon kings. Asterisk, the Viking Age cast a long and terrifying shadow over the Saxon kingdoms of England. From the late 8th century onwards, Norsemen, fierce warriors and seafarers from Scandinavia, arrived in longships, striking suddenly and ruthlessly along the coasts and rivers. Their raids were swift, violent, and often indiscriminate, leaving towns, monasteries, and villages in ruins. For the Saxon kings, the crown became more than a symbol of authority. It became a target, a talisman that, if captured, could grant the invader not only wealth but legitimacy. The Vikings were masters of strategy and surprise. They struck when least expected, using the element of fear as a weapon. Castles and fortresses that had once seemed impregnable were no match for their speed and cunning. Saxon kings found themselves scrambling to defend their lands, often forming temporary alliances with rival lords to counter the common threat. Yet even these alliances were fragile, and the threat of betrayal or delayed support loomed constantly. In this chaotic environment, the safety of the crown, both literal and symbolic, was never guaranteed. Monasteries were frequent targets because of their wealth. These religious centers held treasures in gold, silver, and jewels, often rivaling those of the kings themselves. The Vikings' raids on these sites were devastating. Manuscripts were destroyed, sacred relics stolen, and the clergy either killed or enslaved. The loss of a monastery's wealth could tip the balance of power in a region, enabling invaders to fund further attacks or gain political leverage. For kings, protecting the crown in such circumstances was an immense challenge, and failure could lead to the collapse of their authority. There are numerous accounts of crowns being hidden or transported to prevent them from falling into Viking hands. Some were concealed within the stone walls of abbeys, sealed in secret chambers known only to a few loyal retainers. Others were buried in remote forests or riverbanks, guarded by men willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of preserving legitimacy. Chroniclers recorded these acts of devotion and cunning with reverence, often portraying them as heroic efforts to save a symbol larger than any single ruler. Yet, despite these precautions, some crowns were lost, perhaps never to be recovered, adding layers of mystery and legend to the history of the Saxon kings. The psychological impact of the Viking threat was immense. Citizens lived in constant fear of sudden raids, knowing that their towns could be destroyed in hours. Soldiers and local militias were perpetually on alert, and the population's loyalty was tested by the constant demands of defense. A king's ability to inspire confidence, to protect his people, and to maintain control over his territories was crucial. The crown, ever visible during ceremonies and public appearances, was both a promise and a test, proof that the king remained in power, yet vulnerable to the same dangers as his subjects. In some instances, the crown may have been lost or hidden precisely because of the Vikings. Legends speak of treasures spirited away before invaders could reach them, hidden so well that their locations were forgotten over generations. Some accounts suggest that the crown changed hands multiple times during periods of invasion, either through flight, secret transport, or confiscation by opportunistic nobles. The crown's disappearance could thus be directly linked to these turbulent years, when survival demanded both cunning and courage, and when a single misstep could cost a kingdom its most important symbol. The Vikings were not merely raiders, they were also opportunistic settlers. In regions where they established control, they often integrated with local populations, blending cultures while maintaining military dominance. For the Saxons, this created further challenges, negotiating treaties, paying tribute, and sometimes facing former invaders as new neighbors. The crown, in these circumstances, was more than a symbol of authority, it was a focal point of negotiation, resistance, and assertion of sovereignty. Protecting it meant navigating diplomacy, military strategy, and internal politics simultaneously. Some chroniclers suggest that the crown was hidden in abbeys, cathedrals, or other sacred spaces precisely because of its spiritual as well as political significance. The intertwining of faith and power meant that priests and monks were sometimes entrusted with its protection. Legends tell of secret vaults beneath churches, keys entrusted to the faithful, and guards who were willing to die rather than let the crown fall into enemy hands. Whether these accounts are entirely factual or partly mythic, they reveal the profound importance of the crown as both a symbol and a tangible object of political and spiritual power. During these decades, the crown's survival became a test of strategy and loyalty. Kings had to anticipate Viking movements, secure alliances, and sometimes make painful compromises to preserve their authority. Battles were fought not just on the open field but through intelligence, subterfuge, and sometimes deception. Some crowns may have been hidden for years, even decades, with only a handful of people knowing their location. Each decision carried immense consequences. Failure could mean the loss of legitimacy, the collapse of power, or even death. Despite the violence and upheaval, these years also demonstrated resilience. Communities rebuilt after raids, soldiers returned to defend their homes, and kings found ways to maintain authority under extreme pressure. The crown, even when hidden or threatened, remained a rallying symbol, inspiring courage and unity. It represented continuity in a time when everything else seemed impermanent, a beacon of hope for those who believed in the divine and temporal authority of their rulers. The Viking threat also left a lasting cultural impact. Anglo-Saxon and Norse traditions began to intermingle, influencing language, law, and customs. The crown, as a central symbol of Saxon authority, remained a touchstone in this evolving society. Its story, intertwined with invasions, battles, and hidden treasures, was told and retold, growing into legend and inspiring generations of chroniclers, historians, and storytellers. Even today, historians debate the fate of the crowns during these tumultuous years. Did some survive, hidden in abbeys or forests, waiting to be claimed? Were others destroyed to prevent them from becoming trophies for invaders? The answers remain elusive, but the very mystery underscores the crown's importance. It was more than gold and jewels, it was legitimacy, authority, and the hope of continuity for kingdoms facing relentless threats. The Viking raids illustrate a broader truth about power in the Saxon era. Authority was never absolute, and symbols of power were always contested. Crowns were central to this contest, coveted by kings, envied by nobles, and threatened by external forces. The lost crown of the Saxon kings may have disappeared during these years, but its legacy, of courage, strategy, and the intertwining of political and spiritual authority, endures. As we reflect on this chapter, it becomes clear that the crown's story cannot be separated from the Viking threat. Its disappearance may have been a direct result of these invasions, the product of careful concealment, or the consequence of political intrigue. Whatever the truth, the crown remains a symbol of an era defined by both extraordinary danger and extraordinary resilience. In considering the Viking threat, we also gain insight into the lives of ordinary people. Families rebuilt homes after raids, soldiers defended their towns and castles, and loyal retainers took extraordinary risks to protect their king's authority. The crown, though an object of gold and gems, was inseparable from these human stories. It represented the intersection of ambition, loyalty, fear, and survival, a tangible link between rulers and the people they governed. Ultimately, the lost crown of the Saxon kings stands as a testament to a turbulent period of history. Its story illustrates the constant interplay between power, threat, and human ingenuity. It reminds us that symbols of authority are not just decorative, they are lifelines, rallying points, and prizes that can determine the fate of kingdoms. The Viking threat was a crucible in which the crown, its significance, and its legends were forged, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate historians, storytellers, and enthusiasts to this day. As centuries passed after the fall of the Saxon kingdoms, the lost crown took on a life of its own in the imagination of those who remembered, recorded, or simply whispered its story. What began as a symbol of political power and divine authority evolved into legend, a tale imbued with mystery, intrigue, and sometimes magic. Chroniclers, bards, and storytellers embellished the crown's story, blending fact and fiction until it became a symbol larger than any single king or kingdom. One of the most enduring aspects of these legends was the notion that the crown possessed qualities beyond mere material value. Some stories suggested it conferred wisdom upon the ruler who wore it, granting insight into the hearts of men and the strategies of war. Others claimed that divine favor was concentrated within its gold and jewels, and that to wear it unlawfully could invite disaster, illness, or even death. In a culture that closely tied kingship to the divine, these tales reinforced the idea that the crown was not just an object, but a vessel of destiny and morality. Bards wove tales of kings who rose to greatness because of the crown, and of others who fell because they betrayed or misused it. In these narratives, the crown became a moral agent, rewarding virtue and punishing vice. Some stories portrayed the crown as a test of character. Only the rightful king, pure of heart and strong of spirit, could claim it without consequence. These myths transformed the crown into a narrative device, allowing generations to explore ideals of leadership, courage, and justice. Legends also grew around the crown's disappearance. Some chroniclers claimed that it had been hidden in remote forests, secret caves, or deep within the foundations of abbeys, awaiting discovery by a future ruler worthy of its power. Others suggested that it had been stolen and spirited across the seas, perhaps to the courts of foreign kings, or melted down so that its identity would be forever lost. Each version added layers to the mystery, ensuring that the crown's story remained alive in both oral and written traditions. The lost crown also became a part of local folklore. Villagers told stories of hidden treasures, secret passages, and haunted forests where the crown might lie. Children grew up hearing tales of its gleaming presence, its jewels shining faintly in the moonlight, disappearing when approached too closely. Some spoke of spectral kings wandering the lands in search of their lost crown, their ghostly footsteps echoing through ancient ruins. These stories blurred the line between history and imagination, making the crown a fixture of both cultural memory and popular legend. Historical chroniclers sometimes struggled to separate fact from fiction. Monks and scribes recorded tales that mixed real events, battles, raids, and political intrigue, with imaginative elements, curses, magical properties, and prophetic dreams. Even when scholars attempted to verify details, they often found only fragments, leaving ample space for myth to flourish. The crown's legend therefore became a mirror reflecting the hopes, fears, and values of successive generations. In addition to spiritual or moral significance, the crown's legends often emphasized its role as a symbol of continuity and identity. As kingdoms fell and foreign rulers took the throne, the idea of the lost crown offered a tangible link to a golden age of Saxon authority. It reminded people of a time when kings were chosen for courage, wisdom, and divine favor, and when the legitimacy of power was inseparable from the object that symbolized it. In this sense, the crown became more than a relic, it was a touchstone for cultural memory, a reminder of what had been lost and what could perhaps be regained. Some myths suggest that the crown could only be found by those who were truly worthy. Secret codes, hidden maps, and tests of bravery were often woven into the stories, creating a sense of adventure and quest. Knights, treasure hunters, and ambitious rulers were said to have embarked on journeys in search of it, only to find the crown elusive, vanishing when approached with greed or arrogance. In these tales, the crown acted almost as a living entity, responding to the virtue or vice of those who sought it. Legends also connected the crown to the supernatural. Some stories spoke of protective spirits guarding it, whether angels, ancestors, or the souls of kings themselves. Others claimed that the crown could appear in visions or dreams, offering guidance or warning. These mystical elements enhanced the crown's aura, ensuring that it remained a subject of fascination for centuries. Even today, the idea of a lost artifact imbued with magic captures the imagination, bridging the gap between historical reality and the timeless appeal of legend. The crown's mythic status influenced historical perceptions as well. When later kings and rulers sought to legitimize their authority, they sometimes invoked the memory of the Saxon crown, positioning themselves as heirs to its legacy. By associating with the lost crown, rulers could claim continuity with the past, reinforcing their own legitimacy and authority. In this way, legend and history intertwined, shaping political narratives and cultural identity simultaneously. Furthermore, the crown's legends highlight human fascination with mystery. The fact that it was lost, or perceived as lost, created space for imagination to flourish. People projected their desires, fears, and ideals onto it, turning a missing object into a symbol of possibility and wonder. The crown became a canvas upon which storytellers could explore themes of power, morality, heroism, and human frailty, ensuring that its story remained compelling long after the Saxon kings had faded from the political stage. Oral traditions also preserved the crown's story, often in the form of songs, poems, and local tales. In some regions, villagers believed that the crown would one day resurface, returning to a rightful heir or chosen king. Others warned that those who sought it with greed in their hearts would be cursed, echoing the moral lessons embedded in earlier legends. These stories, passed down through generations, kept the crown alive in collective memory, linking the past to the present through narrative and imagination. Even as historians debated its existence, the lost crown continued to inspire exploration and speculation. Antiquarians, treasure hunters, and scholars all sought clues to its whereabouts, drawn by the dual allure of history and legend. Maps, charters, and chronicles were studied obsessively, with some discoveries sparking new myths and theories about its fate. In this way, the crown's story continued to evolve, bridging the gap between documented history and enduring cultural mythology. The crown's legend also teaches us about the human need to connect with the past. Objects like the lost crown serve as touchstones, allowing successive generations to imagine themselves within the narratives of their ancestors. The crown embodies ambition, loyalty, courage, and ingenuity, qualities that transcend time and place. In celebrating its story, we celebrate the creativity, resilience, and enduring fascination of human beings who seek meaning in history, even when that history is incomplete or mysterious. Ultimately, the legends surrounding the lost crown remind us that history is not only a matter of facts and events but also of stories, imagination, and the human capacity to invest meaning in objects and symbols. The crown's mythic status ensures that it remains alive in the cultural imagination, a reminder of the Saxon kings, their triumphs and failures, and the enduring allure of a lost treasure whose story continues to captivate and inspire. Asterisk, the lost crown of the Saxon kings has inspired countless searches over the centuries. From medieval knights and nobles to Victorian antiquarians and modern historians, many have sought to uncover the fate of this elusive relic. Yet, despite extensive efforts, the crown remains missing, its disappearance a mystery that continues to captivate scholars, treasure hunters, and enthusiasts alike. In the centuries immediately following the Norman conquest, stories of the lost crown circulated among those with access to royal archives, monasteries, and private collections. Chroniclers meticulously recorded battles, successions, and the movements of kings, but the crown itself seemed to vanish from the historical record. Some accounts suggest it was hidden deliberately, either by loyal Saxon nobles attempting to preserve their heritage, or by those seeking to prevent it from falling into Norman hands. Others speculate that it may have been stolen or even melted down, the gold repurposed for new treasures, its identity lost forever. During the Middle Ages, treasure hunters and adventurers were drawn to tales of hidden Saxon relics. Maps, cryptic documents, and oral traditions provided tantalizing hints of the crown's whereabouts. Some sought it in ancient abbeys, believing that the crown had been entrusted to the church for safekeeping. Others explored forests, caves, and ruins, hoping to stumble upon a secret vault long forgotten. While these quests occasionally yielded coins, jewelry, or other artifacts, the crown itself remained elusive. The pursuit of the crown was not merely a matter of curiosity or greed. For many, it represented legitimacy, power, and a connection to England's pre-Norman past. Kings, noble families, and even aspiring rulers considered the crown a symbol that could enhance their authority or justify their claims. By associating themselves with the lost Saxon crown, they sought to invoke continuity with a venerable past, reinforcing their own legitimacy in the eyes of subjects and rivals alike. Over the centuries, the search for the crown evolved alongside advancements in scholarship and archaeology. In the Renaissance, antiquarians studied manuscripts, charters, and historical records, seeking clues to its disappearance. They examined the architectural remnants of Saxon fortresses and monasteries, hoping to locate hidden chambers or vaults. Some claimed to have found fragments of ancient crowns or regalia, yet none could be conclusively identified as the lost crown of the Saxon kings. Still, the allure persisted, inspiring further investigations. During the Victorian era, interest in medieval history surged. Scholars, collectors, and historians combed through archives, libraries, and private estates in search of the crown. Antiquarian societies published studies, cataloging discoveries and attempting to piece together the story of Saxon rule. The lost crown became a symbol of national heritage, representing a connection to a time before the Norman conquest. Even as empirical methods improved, the crown remained elusive, slipping further into legend while retaining a firm place in historical imagination. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen a new wave of searches, blending traditional scholarship with modern technology. Archaeologists use ground-penetrating radar, advanced excavation techniques, and careful analysis of historical sites in the hope of uncovering the crown or traces of its presence. Historians continue to study manuscripts, charters, and letters for subtle references that might indicate its fate. Despite these efforts, the crown has remained beyond reach, a testament to both its historical disappearance and the enduring allure of a lost treasure. The crown's elusiveness has fueled speculation. Some suggest it was hidden in the foundations of abbeys or cathedrals, concealed so well that it may never be found. Others believe it was smuggled abroad, taken to continental courts or private collections, its presence obscured by the passage of time. There are even theories that it was destroyed, melted down to prevent rivals from claiming it. Each hypothesis reflects both the crown's historical significance and the human fascination with the unknown. The search for the lost crown is also a story of human ambition, ingenuity, and perseverance. Generations of scholars, adventurers, and enthusiasts have devoted time, resources, and energy to its discovery. Their efforts underscore the crown's symbolic weight. It is not merely an artifact of gold and jewels, but a tangible link to an era defined by kingship, loyalty, and the struggle for power. Even in absence, it continues to inspire imagination and scholarship alike. Interestingly, the crown's disappearance has contributed to its legendary status. The very act of being lost elevated it from a historical object to a symbol of mystery and desire. Unlike other regalia preserved in museums or treasuries, the lost crown exists primarily in narrative, chronicled in manuscripts, sung in ballads, and speculated upon in modern scholarship. Its story invites us to consider not only what happened to it, but what it represents: legitimacy, authority, and the enduring human fascination with objects of power. The pursuit of the crown also highlights the interweaving of history and myth. Each generation has projected its hopes and fears onto the crown, imagining scenarios in which it could be recovered or returned to rightful heirs. Treasure hunters envisioned secret maps and hidden vaults. Scholars sought historical evidence and corroborating documents. Storytellers wove tales of magical properties and curses. In each case, the crown served as a canvas for human imagination, linking historical inquiry with legend and creativity. Moreover, the crown's story reflects the fragility of memory and record. Many medieval manuscripts were lost, destroyed, or altered over time, erasing crucial details about its fate. Political upheavals, wars, and cultural transformations further obscured its trail. As a result, the crown exists at the intersection of fact and speculation, its history both documented and imagined. This duality ensures that it remains a compelling subject for historians, storytellers, and enthusiasts, bridging centuries of human curiosity and inquiry. The search also illuminates the broader cultural and historical context of the Saxon kingdoms. By tracing the crown's story, we gain insight into political structures, religious practices, and social hierarchies. We learn about the role of loyalty and betrayal, the importance of symbols in governance, and the ways in which material objects can embody authority and power. In this sense, the lost crown is more than a missing artifact. It is a lens through which we can explore the complexities of medieval society. Ultimately, the lost crown of the Saxon kings endures not because it has been found, but because it continues to inspire curiosity, imagination, and scholarly investigation. Its story is a testament to the enduring power of symbols, the human desire to connect with the past, and the mysteries that lie just beyond our reach. Each search, whether successful or not, reinforces its significance, reminding us that history is shaped not only by what survives, but by what is lost and remembered through story. The crown's legend and the ongoing search for it also serve as a metaphor for the pursuit of knowledge itself. Scholars and adventurers alike are drawn to the unknown, compelled to explore, investigate, and understand. The Lost Crown embodies the intersection of history, myth, and human aspiration, a reminder that some treasures are valuable not merely for their material worth, but for the stories, lessons, and inspiration they provide. In reflecting on the centuries of searches, we recognize that the Lost Crown is more than a physical object. It is a symbol of ambition, courage, loyalty, and imagination. Its absence has made it timeless, ensuring that each generation continues to engage with it, interpret it, and be inspired by it. The Lost Crown of the Saxon kings remains an enduring emblem of England's past, a bridge between history and legend, and a mystery that continues to call out across the centuries. While kings, nobles, and warriors fought for crowns and kingdoms, ordinary people, especially children, often bore the heaviest burdens of Saxon and medieval life. In times of war, political upheaval, and invasion, these children were the silent witnesses of history, their lives shaped by events beyond their control. The Lost Crown of the Saxon kings, though a symbol of authority and legitimacy, cast shadows that reached far beyond the halls of power, touching the most vulnerable in ways that are seldom recorded but profoundly felt. Life for children in the Saxon era was harsh and unforgiving. Families relied on every member to contribute to survival. Children worked in fields, tended animals, and learned crafts from a young age. Education, when available, was limited and often linked to religious instruction in monasteries or local churches. Play, leisure, and freedom were luxuries, overshadowed by the constant need to endure and adapt to the dangers around them. Yet despite these hardships, children were not merely passive witnesses. They absorbed knowledge, learned survival, and sometimes displayed remarkable courage in the face of extraordinary challenges. During times of conflict, children's lives became inseparable from the ambitions and fears of adults. Viking raids, civil wars, and rivalries between kings forced families to flee their homes, hide in forests, or seek refuge in fortified towns. Many children witnessed violence firsthand: the burning of villages, the deaths of neighbors, and the terror of invaders at their doors. The crown, the object of adult desire, indirectly shaped these experiences. Its presence, or absence, determined the course of battles, the security of fortresses, and ultimately whether communities survived or perished. One of the most harrowing aspects of these periods was the siege. Castles and fortified towns, while designed to protect, often became prisons during prolonged assaults. Families, including children, were trapped behind stone walls, reliant on dwindling supplies and the fortitude of soldiers defending the gates. Chroniclers describe scenes of hunger, fear, and desperation. Children sometimes witnessed parents forced to make impossible choices, rationing food to the point of starvation, or sending the youngest to hide in crypts or secret chambers to increase their chances of survival. The crown, the focal point of authority, became a distant symbol of hope, yet could not shield these innocents from suffering. The crown's influence was indirect but profound. When kings led armies or negotiated treaties, their decisions affected the lives of every subject, including children. A victory might secure safety for towns and villages, while a defeat could result in loss, displacement, or even massacre. The crown symbolized the power to protect, but also the potential for catastrophe. In this sense, the Lost Crown represents more than political authority. It embodies the stakes of leadership, and the human consequences of power struggles that often fell most heavily on the young and powerless. Children also played roles, however small, in the defense of their communities. Some acted as messengers, carrying vital information between fortifications or fleeing towns. Others helped in practical ways, assisting in cooking, carrying supplies, or tending wounded soldiers. There are accounts of young boys observing battles from hidden vantage points, learning the arts of strategy, courage, and resilience that might one day serve them as adults. Even in the darkest times, these experiences shaped the next generation, instilling lessons in survival, loyalty, and the realities of human conflict. Tragically, not all children survived. Epidemics, starvation, and the violence of raids claimed countless lives. Chroniclers occasionally record their names, often anonymously, as statistics in larger tragedies. Yet even in death, their experiences resonate, reminding us that the story of the Lost Crown is not only about kings and treasures, but about the communities whose fates were intertwined with it. Each child's life, each hardship endured, reflects the far-reaching consequences of political ambition and the human cost of authority. Folktales and oral traditions preserved some of these experiences, sometimes anonymized, sometimes transformed into stories of heroism or survival. Tales of children hiding in crypts during sieges, of young messengers carrying intelligence through enemy lines, or of youths witnessing extraordinary courage, became part of the cultural memory. These narratives connect the crown to real human lives, illustrating the intersection of legend and lived experience, and reminding us that history is shaped as much by the powerless as by the powerful. The crown itself, though largely removed from the day-to-day experiences of children, symbolically represented their fate. The safety of a community, the success of a king, or the outcome of a battle often determined whether a child would survive, be taken captive, or witness tragedy. In stories of lost or hidden crowns, one can imagine children in shadowed corners, observing adult schemes, learning lessons in loyalty and fear, and silently shaping their own understanding of power and survival. Interestingly, these narratives also suggest resilience and adaptation. Children endured, learned, and occasionally found ways to influence events indirectly. Some may have delivered messages that altered military outcomes. Others preserved oral histories that later informed chroniclers. Even as symbols of authority moved through the hands of kings and nobles, children carried the legacy of their communities, their memories intertwined with the very fabric of history. The lost crown, therefore, exists not only in the context of power and legitimacy, but also in the shadows where ordinary lives, especially those of children, unfolded. The story of the children of the Saxon era also highlights the universality of human experience. Across centuries, the young have been affected by the ambitions, fears, and conflicts of adults. Their lives offer perspective, reminding us that history is not solely the record of rulers and battles, but also of those who endure and observe, whose resilience and courage are often unsung. The crown, though physically absent in many of these narratives, symbolizes the forces that shape their existence, the decisions of leaders, the outcomes of wars, and the ever-present interplay of hope and danger. In reflecting on these stories, we see that the lost crown's significance extends beyond material or political value. It is also a lens through which to understand human experience, the vulnerability of children, the resilience of communities, and the profound impact of leadership decisions on lives that often go unrecorded. The crown, while coveted and contested by kings, affects all layers of society, leaving shadows that stretch across generations. Ultimately, the children of the shadows remind us that history is multidimensional. While we may focus on crowns, kings, and battles, the lives of ordinary people, especially the young, are inseparable from these narratives. Their survival, suffering, and resilience offer a poignant counterpoint to the glories and intrigues of rulers, revealing that the true legacy of power is measured not only in conquest, but in its human consequences. The lost crown of the Saxon kings, therefore, is more than a relic or a treasure. It is a symbol that connects rulers, warriors, and ordinary people across time. In understanding its story, we are reminded of the countless children who lived, suffered, and endured in its shadow. Their experiences, though often hidden from the historical record, are an essential part of the tapestry of history, illustrating the profound ways in which symbols of power ripple through the lives of those most vulnerable, shaping the course of generations yet to come. Every crown carries with it the echoes of battles fought to defend it. For the Saxon kings, the last stand was not merely a moment in history, it was a culmination of strategy, courage, fear, and desperation. These final confrontations were often the decisive moments that determined the fate of kingdoms, the survival of rulers, and the destiny of the lost crown. In these tense hours, the true weight of authority was felt not in ceremonial halls, but on the blood-soaked battlegrounds and within the stone walls of fortresses. A last stand was as much psychological as physical. Soldiers and citizens understood that failure meant death, capture, or subjugation. Every decision carried immense consequences. A delayed attack, a failed barricade, or a misjudged retreat could unravel months or years of preparation. Kings who presided over these defenses bore the heaviest burden. The crown, both literal and symbolic, became a focus for loyalty and morale. Its presence reminded defenders of their duty, their honor, and the consequences of failure, serving as a beacon in the chaos of conflict. Sieges were particularly brutal in Saxon times. Castles and fortified towns were designed to withstand prolonged assault, yet they also became cages for those trapped within. Supplies dwindled, disease spread, and fear took root. Chroniclers recount the desperate measures taken to survive, rationing food to near starvation, hiding in secret chambers, and using every available resource to resist invaders. Children, women, and the elderly bore the harshest burdens, while soldiers faced relentless attacks and constant threat. Amidst these trials, the crown remained a symbol of what was at stake, the object that could define victory or defeat. In many cases, the last stand was also an act of defiance. Kings and commanders chose to fight even when the odds were hopeless, knowing that surrender could mean humiliation, enslavement, or death. These final battles often became legendary, celebrated for the valor of those who held the line against overwhelming forces. The crown, ever present in the minds of defenders, represented continuity, legitimacy, and the hope that their sacrifices would be remembered even if they fell. The physical reality of these confrontations was terrifying. Archers fired volleys of arrows, siege engines hurled stones and fire, and infantry clashed in confined spaces where chaos reigned. Courtyards became killing fields, gates were breached by battering rams and tunnels undermined walls. Blood flowed through staircases and corridors, and defenders often fought to the last breath to protect both their lives and the symbols of authority, including the crown. Every battle was a test of endurance, courage, and strategy, with the outcome determining the survival of entire communities. Betrayal sometimes played a role in the last stand. Infiltrators, spies, or disloyal retainers could open gates, sabotage defenses, or provide intelligence to the enemy. Such acts magnified the chaos, turning what might have been a heroic defense into a catastrophe. Kings and commanders had to remain vigilant not only against external threats but also against the hidden dangers within their own walls. The crown, in these moments, symbolized more than power. It represented trust, legitimacy, and the fragile nature of loyalty. Even when the defenders knew defeat was inevitable, the last stand became a testament to human courage and resilience. Chroniclers described warriors fighting in narrow hallways, archers defending towers to the last arrow, and commanders rallying men even as walls crumbled around them. These acts of bravery inspired generations, emphasizing that the defense of the crown, and by extension the kingdom, was an obligation that transcended personal safety. The crown embodied the honor, dignity, and moral responsibility of leadership, demanding courage in the face of overwhelming adversity. The crown itself, though often not physically present on the battlefield, was a guiding principle. Soldiers and citizens fought for the symbol of authority, knowing that its loss would mean the collapse of governance, security, and continuity. In some accounts, crowns were hidden during sieges, carried away by trusted retainers, or protected within secret chambers to prevent capture. These measures underscore the crown's importance as a tangible and symbolic object, a reminder that legitimacy and survival were intertwined in medieval society. In instances of last stands, ordinary people were forced to make extraordinary decisions. Families hid children in crypts or secret rooms, supplied food to exhausted soldiers, and maintained fortifications under threat of attack. These acts of resilience were crucial in prolonging defenses, sometimes allowing a ruler to negotiate terms or await reinforcements. The crown, in this context, symbolized more than authority. It represented hope, continuity, and the human desire to protect what is cherished even in the direst circumstances. Many last stands ended in tragedy. Fortresses fell, kings were killed or captured, and survivors were often enslaved or executed. The crown, coveted by victors, could vanish or be seized, changing hands and redefining political legitimacy. These losses illustrate the stakes involved in defending symbols of power and the human cost of failure. Yet even in defeat, the stories of courage and sacrifice endured, preserving the legacy of those who fought to the last and reinforcing the crown's symbolic significance across generations. The narrative of the last stand also underscores the unpredictability of history. Small tactical decisions, a sally from the gate, the placement of a few archers, or the timing of a counterattack, could determine the survival of defenders and the fate of the crown. Fortunes could shift in minutes, illustrating how closely intertwined luck, strategy, and courage were in determining the outcome of battles. The crown, as a symbol of authority and legitimacy, remained central, influencing both morale and strategy even when absent from the field of combat. Beyond the battlefield, the last stand shaped culture and memory. Chroniclers and poets immortalized acts of bravery, loyalty, and defiance, connecting the crown to ideals of honor, courage, and resilience. These accounts emphasized the moral dimension of leadership, portraying the defense of authority as both a practical and symbolic duty. The crown, therefore, was more than a physical object. It became a narrative anchor, linking individual actions to broader themes of justice, sacrifice, and human dignity. In reflecting on these events, it becomes clear that the last stand was not merely about survival, it was about the preservation of identity, community, and legitimacy. Kings, soldiers, and citizens alike understood that their fates were entwined with the crown, and that its defense symbolized the continuation of order and justice. Even when victory was impossible, the act of resistance affirmed their values, leaving a legacy of courage and honor that transcended the immediate outcome. The lost crown of the Saxon kings, therefore, is inseparable from these stories of last stands. Its significance is measured not only in material value but in its role as a symbol that inspired courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. Whether hidden, carried into battle, or coveted by enemies, the crown shaped the actions and decisions of those who defended it, linking personal valor to the broader trajectory of history. Ultimately, the last stand illustrates a timeless truth. Power is inseparable from responsibility, and symbols of authority carry profound consequences for those who seek, wield, or defend them. The crown's story, intertwined with the bravery and sacrifice of kings, soldiers, and ordinary people, remains a testament to the human capacity for courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a reminder that even in defeat, the defense of ideals and symbols can leave a lasting imprint on history, echoing through the centuries as a beacon of resilience, honor, and enduring legacy. Victory in medieval warfare was never without cost. For the Saxon kings and their contemporaries, the conquest of a castle, the defeat of an enemy, or the seizure of a crown often came at a staggering human, social, and economic price. While chroniclers celebrated triumphs and commemorated heroic deeds, they also documented the suffering, loss, and devastation that accompanied even the most decisive victories. The lost crown of the Saxon kings, coveted by rulers and invaders alike, was both a prize and a catalyst for conflict, and its pursuit exacted a toll that reached far beyond the battlefield. One of the most immediate consequences of victory was the human cost. Soldiers who survived were often exhausted, wounded, or traumatized by the violence they had witnessed. Even victorious armies faced disease, malnutrition, and the psychological burden of killing. Chroniclers recount scenes of entire units decimated in pursuit of a single stronghold, with survivors forced to endure the aftermath of their own triumphs. In this context, victory was never absolute. It was tempered by the suffering it left in its wake, and the crown, symbol of authority, remained a reminder of what had been risked and lost to obtain it. Civilians often suffered the most. Conquered towns and villages frequently faced looting, destruction, and massacre. Women, children, and the elderly were particularly vulnerable, forced to flee, hide, or endure violence. Monasteries, repositories of wealth and culture, were pillaged, their treasures seized and their inhabitants enslaved or killed. Victory for the king or commander could mean survival for the political elite, yet it often brought devastation to those who had no stake in the conflict beyond being caught in its path. The crown, in these circumstances, was both a symbol of triumph and a source of tragedy, its presence inseparable from the human suffering incurred to secure it. Economic consequences were equally profound. Castles, fortresses, and towns required repair after sieges. Fields were burned, livestock slaughtered, and trade disrupted. Taxation and levies increased to fund reconstruction and to pay soldiers who had fought for the crown. Wealth that might have been used to sustain communities was instead diverted to maintain armies, fortifications, and the apparatus of power. Victory, therefore, carried a price that extended beyond immediate loss of life, affecting livelihoods, infrastructure, and the long-term stability of regions. The moral cost of victory was another enduring consideration. Leaders often had to make brutal decisions, executing prisoners, enslaving captives, or enforcing harsh punishments to consolidate power. While such measures might secure the crown or deter rebellion, they also created resentment, fear, and cycles of vengeance that could persist for generations. Chroniclers often wrestled with the tension between celebrating martial success and lamenting the human suffering that accompanied it, portraying victory as both glory and burden. Political consequences were similarly complex. The acquisition of a crown or territory could shift the balance of power, triggering new alliances, rivalries, and conflicts. A victorious king might face uprisings from those loyal to the previous ruler or from nobles dissatisfied with the outcome. Maintaining control required constant vigilance, diplomacy, and sometimes further warfare. The crown, though emblematic of ultimate authority, symbolized not only success but also the ongoing responsibility to govern effectively, manage dissent, and prevent the collapse of newly conquered domains. Victory also imposed psychological burdens on leaders. Kings and commanders were acutely aware that their decisions had consequences not only for themselves but for all those under their authority. The weight of responsibility, the memory of lives lost, and the knowledge that triumph often entailed suffering could be profound. Chroniclers note the introspection of rulers who, despite outward displays of triumph, were haunted by the costs of their victories. The crown, emblematic of power and legitimacy, was inseparable from these burdens, a reminder that authority came with obligations and consequences that extended far beyond the battlefield. In some cases, the pursuit of victory led to overreach, with armies extending beyond their supply lines or engaging in campaigns that strained resources. Ambition, spurred by the desire to claim or protect the crown, could lead to strategic miscalculations, prolonged conflict and additional loss. The crown, therefore, was both a motivator and a risk, a symbol that inspired extraordinary effort while exposing rulers and their subjects to danger and hardship. Yet despite these costs, victory also brought rewards. Securing a crown could consolidate legitimacy, enhance prestige and provide material wealth. Conquered lands, tributes and spoils of war strengthened the ruler's position, allowing for reconstruction, investment and the display of authority. The crown itself, as the ultimate symbol of power, served as a tangible reminder of success, reinforcing loyalty and commanding respect. However, even these rewards were tempered by the awareness of the human, economic and moral toll that had been paid. Historical accounts often juxtapose the glory of victory with the devastation it wrought. Chroniclers describe the joy of returning rulers, parades of triumph and ceremonial displays, alongside the sobering aftermath of ruined towns, grieving families and decimated armies. These dual narratives underscore the complex nature of victory. It was never simply a measure of success, but a reflection of the costs borne, sacrifices made, and responsibilities incurred in its pursuit. The crown, both literal and symbolic, stood at the center of this narrative, embodying the stakes of power and the consequences of triumph. Victory also shaped memory and legend. Tales of heroic feats, clever strategy, and bravery became part of cultural consciousness, inspiring future generations. At the same time, the suffering and devastation of war were remembered as cautionary reminders of the consequences of ambition. The lost crown of the Saxon kings, whether seized, hidden, or vanished, occupies a similar space in collective memory, a symbol of authority that carried both glory and cost, inspiring reverence, curiosity, and caution alike. In examining the price of victory, we are reminded that power is inseparable from responsibility. Kings who acquired crowns were tasked with governance, protection, and justice, their authority legitimized by the very symbols they fought to obtain. The crown, therefore, is not merely an object of desire, it is a representation of the obligations, burdens, and moral challenges inherent in leadership. Success in battle is inseparable from the human, social, and ethical consequences that follow. Even in modern interpretations, the narratives of victory and its costs resonate. Historians, storytellers, and enthusiasts reflect on the sacrifices made to secure crowns, territories, and authority, recognizing that the splendor of triumph is inseparable from the suffering it entails. The lost crown of the Saxon kings thus remains both a historical artifact and a symbolic lens, through which we understand the interplay of power, ambition, responsibility, and human experience. Ultimately, the price of victory is a reminder that every conquest carries consequences. While the acquisition of a crown may bring honor, legitimacy, and material reward, it also demands recognition of the costs incurred, lives lost, communities disrupted, and the enduring moral weight borne by those in power. The story of the lost crown encapsulates these tensions, illustrating that the pursuit of authority is inseparable from responsibility, sacrifice, and the complex realities of human history. Through this lens, we understand that the lost crown is not merely a relic of gold and jewels, but a testament to the human experience, ambition, courage, suffering, and resilience. It symbolizes the triumphs and tragedies of the past, reminding us that the authority it represents was earned, defended, and maintained at extraordinary cost. The crown story is a reflection of the intertwined nature of power, morality, and human consequence, echoing across centuries as a reminder of both the glory and the price of victory. Centuries have passed since the era of the Saxon kings, yet the echoes of their world remain etched in stone, wood, and memory. Castles, abbeys, and ruined fortifications stand as silent witnesses to the struggles, victories, and losses of a time when crowns were both prized and perilous. These remnants, weathered by wind, rain, and the passage of time, preserve the stories of ambition, courage, and survival, inviting us to listen closely to the echoes of history that still resonate through their walls. Walking through the ruins of a medieval castle, one can almost hear the distant clamor of battle, the clash of swords, the thundering of hooves, and the shouts of soldiers defending the walls. Each stone carries the weight of human endeavor and tragedy, a tangible connection to the lives that were shaped by the pursuit of power and the protection of authority. The lost crown of the Saxon kings, while absent from these ruins, casts a long shadow, symbolizing the human desires, fears, and ambitions that animated these spaces. These structures were not merely defensive, they were symbols of control, authority, and community. Towers rose as watchful eyes over the land, walls enclosed entire populations, and gates marked the threshold between safety and peril. Within these fortifications, decisions were made that affected kings and commoners alike. Strategies were planned, treasures hidden, and defenses strengthened, all to protect the symbols of legitimacy, most importantly the crown. The architecture itself reflects the inseparable link between power and space, between authority and the environment that safeguarded it. Visitors to these ruins often report a sense of the past lingering in the air. The echo of stone is more than metaphorical, it is the resonance of centuries of human experience, laughter, grief, determination, and despair. Some claim to hear ghostly footsteps in abandoned halls, whispers in corridors, or distant drums of war. These stories, whether literal or imagined, reinforce the presence of history in these spaces. The crown, as the focal point of many of the events that shape these fortifications, is central to the imagination that gives life to these echoes. The lost crown itself, though never recovered, continues to captivate historians, archaeologists, and storytellers. Its absence allows for speculation, interpretation, and legend, creating a space in which imagination can thrive. The search for it has led to discoveries of other treasures, provided insight into medieval life, and inspired countless narratives. In this sense, the crown's influence extends far beyond its material existence, shaping understanding of the past and enriching cultural memory. Many ruins show signs of both defense and destruction. Burnt timbers, collapsed walls, and remnants of siege engines testify to the intensity of the conflicts fought over crowns, territory, and honor. Archaeologists study these sites, uncovering artifacts, mapping defensive strategies, and reconstructing the lives of those who once inhabited them. Every discovery provides a glimpse into the human experiences that animate history, revealing how ambition, survival, and ingenuity intersected in the pursuit of power. The crown, ever symbolic, remains central to these narratives. The echo of stone also reminds us of the fragility of human endeavors. Fortresses built to withstand years of assault eventually crumble, their stones scattered and their treasures lost. Yet, the stories they embody endure, carried in manuscripts, oral traditions, and collective memory. The lost crown is emblematic of this duality, both absent and present, tangible and legendary, material and symbolic. It represents the tension between impermanence and legacy, illustrating how history preserves meaning even when objects themselves are lost. Exploring these ruins, one imagines the daily lives of the people who inhabited them. Soldiers patrolling ramparts, children playing in courtyards, women preparing food in kitchens, and kings presiding over councils, all lived under the shadow of both the crown and external threats. Each stone, each ruined wall, contains traces of these experiences. The crown, whether physically present or hidden, influenced the rhythm of life within these spaces, shaping decisions, behaviors, and the very fabric of community. Some ruins retain elements of secrecy and mystery. Hidden chambers, secret tunnels, and concealed staircases hint at measures taken to protect treasures, including crowns, from invaders. These architectural features speak to ingenuity, strategy, and the profound significance attributed to symbols of power. The lost crown of the Saxon kings may have been hidden in such places, its precise location forever unknown, yet its symbolic presence continues to inspire imagination and scholarship. The echo of stone is also a reminder of the continuity of human curiosity. Visitors, historians, and storytellers return to these sites, seeking connection with the past, insight into human nature, and the thrill of uncovering secrets. Each generation interprets the ruins through its own lens, projecting hopes, fears, and ideals onto the remnants of history. The lost crown, absent yet omnipresent in these interpretations, serves as a focal point for understanding authority, legacy, and the human desire to leave a mark upon the world. Moreover, these ruins foster reflection on the consequences of ambition and power. The crown, central to many of the conflicts that shape these spaces, represents both the allure and the danger of authority. The pursuit of power brought triumph and disaster, courage and suffering. The echo of stone reminds us that these forces were inseparable from the human experience, and that the stories preserved in architecture, artifacts, and legend continue to resonate because they speak to timeless themes of leadership, loyalty, and resilience. In some places, the natural world has begun to reclaim these structures. Ivy climbs walls, trees break through foundations, and rivers erode moats. This interplay between human construction and nature's reclamation serves as a metaphor for history itself. Objects of great ambition may fade or vanish, but the echoes of human endeavor persist. The crown, though lost, remains an enduring symbol within this landscape, connecting the physical ruins to the intangible legacy of leadership, courage, and aspiration. The echo of stone also emphasizes the importance of memory and storytelling. Without chronicles, oral histories, and scholarly inquiry, the lives, struggles, and achievements associated with these castles would be lost. The crown's story, intertwined with these spaces, continues to inform our understanding of the past. It reminds us that objects, though important, gain significance through the narratives we attach to them, and that history is a living dialogue between material evidence and human imagination. As modern visitors walk through these ruins, they participate in a centuries-long conversation. They interpret the stones, imagine the lives of those who lived and died there, and speculate on the fate of treasures like the lost crown. In doing so, they become part of the echo, adding their voices to the resonance of history. The crown, though unseen, acts as a bridge between generations, linking the ambitions, fears, and hopes of the past to those of the present. Ultimately, the echo of stone teaches us that history is layered, complex, and enduring. The lost crown of the Saxon kings may never be recovered, yet its story continues to shape our understanding of human experience. It embodies authority, courage, sacrifice, and the interplay of power and consequence. The ruins, the chronicles, and the legends together create a tapestry in which the crown's influence is felt across centuries, reminding us that even in absence, symbols of human endeavor retain profound significance. Through this lens, we recognize that the crown is more than a historical artifact. It is a testament to human ambition, resilience, and imagination. It reflects the triumphs and tragedies of those who pursued, defended, or witnessed its presence. The echo of stone carries these stories forward, allowing us to hear in some small way the footsteps, voices, and dreams of the past. In this enduring resonance, the lost crown continues to live, not as a physical object, but as a symbol of history itself, a reminder of what was sought, defended, and imagined across the centuries. Asterisk.